We're going to talk briefly about HAZOPs, LOPA audits, and why do we need them. A brief history on HAZ Optimizer, PHA Global, and PSMPro, why we're doing the upgrade, and then we jump straight into the live demo. In the process safety industry in general, when we talk about process hazard analysis, it's one of the items that engineers do on a regular basis as required by the regulations, whether it's the OSHA in the US or the governing bodies in Europe and the UK, and so on. We look at mainly PNIDs in general, and we look at identifying what could go wrong in a specific process. Let's say we have a production environment for oil. We look at what could go wrong, how we can quantify that risk to a certain extent, and then looking at ways to properly mitigate the risk to make sure that we don't affect the health, the safety, and the environment at the same time. The PHA uses multiple methodologies. One of the most famous ones is the HAZOP, which is the Hazard and Operability Study. We also do faulty analysis, failure mode effect analysis, layers of protection analysis, a human factors checklist, ammonia refrigerations, and so on. So there are lots of aspects that we look at when we perform a PHA, not just looking at only one node at the time. We look at the process overall and try to mitigate any potential risks that might occur. On the other hand, when we look at compliance audits, we have regular evaluations to make sure that any processes and operations that we do or any activities that we do on site or in the production environment are actually in compliance with the regulations like health and safety, HSE in the UK, general standards, RAGA and internal policies that are defined by the organization performing the compliance audit. The main goal of the audit is to identify items where we are non-compliant. And by that, there are different levels. Some of them would be regulatory, where we will fail an inspection or an audit. Some of them might be for local attention, where something could be done in a better way. And that gives us areas for improvement and potentially performing corrective action to make sure that we go back on track and stay compliant with the regulations and the rules that we have. So why do we need both? Basically, trying to make the world a safer place. We've been doing process safety management now for a very long time, and we've helped a vast number of clients properly size their relief devices, properly perform their PHAs. We have teams who are expert and leaders in PHAs and HAZOP and LOPAs who are doing PHAs almost 24/7 all day, every day of the year. So our goal is to prevent incidents and ensure that all the operations occurring in a production environment are done in a safe way. On the other hand of it, we make sure the HAZOPs and compliance audits make sure that as an organization, they are compliant with the laws and regulations, which gives us a way to avoid fines, and eventually we can improve the operational efficiency throughout carrying corrective action as part of the compliance audit and so on. PSMPro. In 2008, we had a product called HAZ Optimizer. It was, back in the days, it was a very strong and robust based on the time that it was produced on. It had its own, I would say, limitations and some functionalities that could not be done at that time due to the technology limitation that we had back then. In 2015, we've developed PHA Global, which was an Excel add-in. So you would open your Excel and you would have an add-in in the toolbar where you can perform or do your PHA or HAZOP or LOPA. It was actually quite flexible and successful, but later down the road, we started having problems, not because of the platform itself. It was on the Microsoft side where they started shifting around security in Excel, security in Microsoft Office, and that caused us a lot of trouble. So we thought, okay, why don't we do this in a different way? And we launched PHA Global as a standalone application that does not require Microsoft Excel in 2022. We had a lot of interest in that version. We upgraded a handful of clients to it. But then we had a better idea, which is why don't we combine PHA Global, which is the PHA hazard component, IO Auditor, which is the compliance component, fault analysis, which is IO Logic, security and vulnerability assessment, which is IO Secure, all into one product. So you can do all of them in one place without having to jump around between different applications. That actually gave us a lot of capabilities on expanding. So for example, the action item tracking that PSMPro integrates with Process Safety Enterprise works in the same way with PHA Global and can be used in IO Auditor and in IO Secure. So it's all actually one central platform that manages everything. PSMPro is very easy to use. The upgrade process is seamless. You just get a download link, you install it, and you're directly up and running. We've worked a lot with our own subject matter experts, the PHA leaders who are working around the clock, to make it extremely simple and very, very streamlined in terms of the user experience. One example I always give is that in Excel, if you want to do something for a PHA, it will take you 10 clicks. We do that in PSM Pro with literally one click. So we've simplified it so much that it makes your life a lot easier when using it. Traditionally, people would use a standard Excel format or a spreadsheet to perform their PHAs. So PSM Pro, in its essence, looks like a spreadsheet, but it's a smart one where actions are made simpler rather than typing every single sentence. We've added a lot of tools to the application so that your life is a bit easier. And as I said, we've implemented all of them into one place. So you open PSMPro, you want to start, you can create your PHA. If you're done with your PHA and you want to do a compliance audit, you just create a new project and start your compliance audit using the compliance templates. Worth mentioning that all the templates in PSM Pro, as it has been historically, all of them are user configurable. You can change the layout, change the columns, change what data is in them, and so on. And merging the three platforms into one actually helps us internally, where we have shorter release cycles, where we release updates very frequently. Historically, we used to release a version every probably a month or two. With PSM Pro, we almost have a release every 2 to 3 weeks tops, where we're continuously adding improvement, adding additional features, fixing issues under the hood that might eventually affect performance. We are proactively updating the application all the time. Worth mentioning that if you have an Excel-based PSA Global project that you've used in the past, PSM Pro can automatically convert it for you when you open it. So it's always backward compatible with PSA Global, IO Auditor, and IO Logic. I'm going to hand over to Reshma to give us a demonstration of how practical and easy to use.
Thank you, Kamel. I'm going through a brief demonstration of PSMPro based on all the points that Kamel mentioned in his presentation. So let's explore some of the features and functionalities that PSMPro offers. We'll actually do this by creating a PHA study from scratch. So it is easier to understand. Also, we can cover all the options that are present in the software. So to begin with, as Kamel mentioned in his presentation, PSMPro is now a combination of PHA hazard studies, compliance audits, fault analysis, and security and vulnerability component. So to begin with, let me start by creating a new study. You can see the options that are offered here. I'll just click on the PHA or the HAZOP to begin with. And I'm creating a new study. So as you can see here, PSMPro comes with a predefined set of templates built into the software. So for the PHAs, you can see there are various options like checklist, combustible dust, where it has many options, HAZOP. Under HAZOP, you can also see that we have the latest RMP-based template, and it has some of the what if templates and the LOPA template. For the demonstration, I will start with the generic numbered template. Also, another important thing to mention is that all these templates, even though they are predefined, they are customizable. So the user can configure these templates according to the needs. To do that, the option is to click on the configure template option, which you can see on the form at the bottom. And you click on OK, the entire template structure is unfolded here. So on the left, you can see the available columns such as deviation, cause, consequence. So these are the columns that are built into the template structure. But additionally, you can add more columns if you want. You can delete more columns and so on. Let me start by moving all of the columns, selecting all of them to the template I want to create. So now I've selected all of these columns in just one click. And clicking on each column will again display the properties of the column on the right. So for example, deviation. What can I do with the column properties? I can change the column title. I can decide how big I want my column to be displayed in the template. And I can also choose the column type. We have different types of columns that we can add in the template, for like drop down, checkbox, or date. For example, if you click on the due date column, it is of the type date. Another example is the consequence category column. It is of the type drop down. So you can always configure the column to be of a specific type, the user chosen one. Another thing to mention is the column hierarchy. So in every template, there is something called as the hierarchy that creates a relationship between these columns. For example, the cause column, you can see that the deviation is set as the parent column for cause. To explain this in simpler terms, it means one deviation can have multiple causes. Another example is consequence. You can see that cause is set as the parent column for consequence, which means one cause can have multiple consequences. So in this way, you can set up the custom hierarchy that you want for the template that you're creating. And any operation that you perform on the template will be done within PSMPro without breaking the hierarchy. So I'll explain more about the hierarchy when I actually create the template, so it's easier to understand. So once you've customized and configured the template according to however you want, you can save this template for further use. That is, if you are creating another PHA study, you can reuse this customized template, or you can just use it for the study you're currently creating. So for now, let me go with the generic numbered template that I've chosen. What PSMPro does is it creates a template in the form of a spreadsheet, which you will see in a moment. So once you've created a new study, this template, the generic numbered HAZOP template, is added as a node. And the form you can see here is the node information form, which is displayed every time you create a node or you add a new node into the study. So this node captures all the information that is related node specific. For example, the description of the node. Let me just write a sample description that says this is node 1. And drawing numbers, for example, you can enter all your PNID numbers that is associated with this particular node. You can add a system name, production, for example. And you can also add some information about the study that you're working on. Let me add the company name and the location to be UK. So all this information that you're storing, adding into the node information form, you can also add it to the reporting, which I will demonstrate a bit later. This makes it easier to go through the nodes, navigate between the nodes. It's easier to look at what this node, where it belongs to. So I click on OK to close this form. And this is the template that's created. So I can scroll through the end of the template. All the columns that were there are here. And if you can see the user interface, it looks exactly like a spreadsheet. Also, it can perform all the functionalities, all the capabilities of a spreadsheet are present here. You can even perform basic mathematical operations, such as like multiplication. You just enter the value you want or the formula you want, for example, something like 15 times 3, you get a result for that. So because it looks very much like a spreadsheet, it is very easier, it is familiar to the user, and data entry is also easier. So let us start by adding some data to the template to show how easy it is for the data entry. And for high flow, let me add a cause. It says control valve failure. You can see that the numbering is generated automatically. I'll talk a bit about numbering later. So this is the cause that I've added to the deviation high flow. Now I want to add another cause to the same deviation. The simplest with PSMPro, it's very easy to add multiple causes or multiple consequences to the parent. The way to do this is to go to the line tab and clicking on add cause, it's added a line, an extra cost for you under deviation without breaking the hierarchy. And I can also add multiple causes by using keyboard shortcuts. Like I just do it on my keyboard, Control plus plus plus. So it's very easier, and within a few clicks, you can achieve whatever you want. Let me add another cause, pump failure. So now I've added two causes under the same deviation. In the same way, I can add multiple consequences. Overfilling, for example. And I'll add another one. Overpressure. And for pump failure, let me have high temperature. So in this way, I can create the entire structure of the template by adding data entry in very limited number of steps. Moving on to the next column, it's the consequence category column. This is a special type of column. It's not just a text. It is a drop-down column. So you can see that for each consequence, you can associate with the consequence category, A, E, or S. Let's say you do not like the values that are built in from the template, or you want to write the actual names of the category. You can always customize this. The way to do this is to go to the Node tab and you click on Lookup Tables. You get the drop-down column here, that is consequence. These are the values that were displayed in the drop-down. So let me change them to their actual names. A, I changed it to the asset, environment, safety, and let me add an additional one, operation. So in this way, I've customized my drop-down values for the consequence category column. I close this, and when I refresh the drop-down now, these are populated with the new values that I've entered. I just click on asset and some random values that I'm assigning for each consequence. You can add values for the safeguards column as well. For overfilling, let me just say there were no safeguards. And you can also observe that the numbering is being populated continuously when you enter data. So this numbering is particularly useful to avoid data repetition. Before moving on to the next column, which is S, L, and R, we have to look at the risk matrix. Basically, SLR defines the severity, likelihood, and the risk level ranking. That's for the chosen S and L. So to look at the risk matrix that's associated with the study, we have to go to the File tab and click on Risk Matrix. Here, you can see the risk matrix that is defined. This is also a built-in template that comes within PSMPro. Again, you can customize the risk matrix. You can add more severity values. You can add more likelihood values. You can define more risk levels. You can change the colors of the risk levels. I mean, in terms of customization, it is completely flexible. There are a lot of value options that you can add. And let me demonstrate some of them. For example, let's say I want to add another level of severity 5. So I go to the severity tab and I add another level 5. And I click on save. So this instantly added another column for me. Let me define some new risk levels here. So as of now, you can see that these risk levels do not have a color associated to this. This is because I have not yet defined the risk level E in my risk ranking table. As of now, there are only 4 risk levels. So let me add another one, E, and I can choose a color of my liking for that, and I save. So now this risk matrix is configured to have 5 risk levels and 5 consequences of severity and 5 likelihood values. You can also add other severity criteria, which will be instantly populated. And the target frequency is especially useful when you're using LOPA nodes, which I will explain a bit later. But again, coming back to the risk matrix, you can change the values here. It will instantly update. You can play with the risk matrix however you want and save them as a part of the application. That's PSMPro. You can save it as a template, just like how you stored the PHA template, and you can reuse them in a different study. Or there is no limitation that you have to use the same risk matrix in the entire study at all times. You can also change the values on the fly, and the risk levels will be refreshed automatically. So yeah, in the severity values, the values that I have defined will appear here. Now, there's another thing that I have to do. For the risk levels, when I added the new severity, I did not save it, and that's the result. It was not updated here. But the current risk matrix is this, which is associated with the study. Let me add the new value here and do the same steps, define a new value, new E value, add a color to it. Yeah. So now, if you can see in the severity, the new value that I added, 5, is refreshed in the dropdown. So let me choose 5, and I will choose a likelihood. The risk level is automatically calculated. The same way I can populate it with different values, 2 and 4 example. So the risk level is automatically calculated. And moving on to the next column, recommendations. I can add some for overfilling. Sample recommendation is install an automated fill level indicator. And for this, let me just call it. So at this point, we have populated the study starting from deviation, cause, consequence category, safeguards, and recommendations. This is actually the basic data entry that is common to any other template that you would create in the study. Talking more about the numbering, and which is associated with the hierarchy, you can see that the numbering for cause, the first cause is 1.1.1 based on its parent, similarly for consequence and safeguards. The thing I mentioned about data repetition, how can we reuse this numbering and not continue to enter the same data again and again? To demonstrate this, let me add another node to the study. To add another node, I click on the node tab and then click on the add button. I am again presented with the same list of templates that's built into the software. This time I'll choose the RMP HAZOP process and I click on OK. A node is instantly added to my study. So in my study, I can see that in the second node, extra values, additional values that were not there in the generic numbered HAZOP template is there. So this reflects the latest RMP regulations that we have updated into the software. To use the numbering, I can type something like C1.2. And it will instantly create a reference for me. And clicking on this reference will take me back to the first node and the 1.2 numbering, which is no or low flow. So this makes it very easy to have references across the nodes. Let's say the study has 60 nodes or 70 nodes. It is very easy to create references from the second node to the 50th node. And you can also navigate back and forth so that it's very easy to have links between the same deviations or the same causes similarly. So this is how the numbering is used. The next thing to look at would be reporting. So PSMPro has a lot of reporting options. It is comprehensive. It is PDF. It is not an image. You can print them. You can scale them. It is highly scalable. To begin with, let's look at the risk summary. Risk summary is the most easiest, and it gives a summary of the entire. For example, let me choose the summary report, and I'll select all the nodes. There are 2 nodes. I know I have not added any risk levels in the second one, but then let's try and generate the report for it. The report is generated instantly. If you look at the report, this is a PDF, it's not an image. This is a cumulative summary of the risk levels that are present across all the nodes. So you can instantly have an idea of how many A-level risks are there in my study, or how many B, C, and so on, all the risk levels that you have mentioned. Also, you can customize your templates to have multiple risk levels. Let's say before recommendations, after recommendations. So you can also filter this report by choosing the risk level before recommendations or after recommendations. Similarly, like I mentioned, this is the summary, but there's also the detailed report. Detailed report is a Microsoft Excel based report where it will categorize each risk level into each sheet, and then it gives you the detailed risk summary or risk summary that's present in your node. Like I mentioned here, so for my study, I did not have any A risk levels, B, C, yes, I had a C risk level, and E. So all of these deviations and the causes are categorized based on the risk level that I've categorized them into. So in this way, you can generate two different types of risk summary reports. But the main report is available under the generate option. If I click on the generate option, you can see the different various options that are available to generate a report. So I'll go through some of them. Here the nodes are present. You can select which node you want to include in the report. For this report, let me select all of them. And to the right, you have different reporting options where you can choose the paper size, you can choose the formatting, the font, and other things. And you can choose the column that you want to be included in the report. For example, you want to omit the numbering column. You just want the text column. So you can choose which column to include, and you can choose the alignment of the data in the report. So these are just a bunch of reporting options to make the report look more presentable and more according to your needs. Coming to the contents of the report. So here there are a bunch of options. For example, the cover page. If I click on the cover page, it lets me add a cover page description. Let me add a sample description. This is a sample demo. And if you have a client logo, you can add the logo, which will be added to the cover page. Let me add the disclaimer, client name, IO Mosaic. Right. So these are the cover page options. Similarly, you can add appendices. Let's say you have legacy PHA global projects, or you have other PNIDs that you want to be a part of this PHA study. So in this case, you can just add them as a form of appendices. Like you can add those files here, and they will be appended at the end of the report. And you can include the risk matrix, the severity, the likelihood, and the risk level values. You can include them as a part of the report. You can see some of the options here have been disabled. That is because they have not been defined yet. So to define, once you've defined the project description and notes, for example, they will be enabled here. Similarly, executive summary, past incident review. And the other thing to mention is, again, the reporting is highly customizable. You can change the order of these sections. So if I want my risk matrix to appear above my notes, I can just choose them to appear in a different location. And yes, these are the different options that are available. So let me generate the report for that. Also, once you've chosen these options, you can save them, and so that you don't have to choose them again and again. So this is the cover page. This was the description I added. Then you have the disclaimer, the table of contents, and you can see on the navigation pane that you have the risk matrix here, node 1. So this is actually the table. It's exactly read from the study. It's not an image. So whatever structure you've created there is recreated in the report. This is the report for node 2. So in this way, you can actually create a comprehensive report and customize it to your liking. And the next thing to demonstrate is the LOPA node. So I can actually transfer this entire scenario to the LOPA node with just one click. The way to do that is, for example, if I take the first one, if I take overfilling, for example, there's a LOPA scenario column here. So I just enable the checkbox there, and it will prompt me asking if I want to transfer the selected scenario. I click on yes. And then I have to choose a LOPA node because it's not there in the study. So if you actually have a LOPA node, then you can choose amongst the ones that you have. So what this transfer does is it transfers this entire scenario to the LOPA node in just one click. You can see that some of the values have been pre-populated. So these are taken from node 1, the scenario that I have entered here, and as a reference is created to the overfilling consequence under the reference number that is associated with the consequence there. Let me rename this as a LOPA node, and let me change the color to distinguish from the other HAZOP nodes. So in this way, I know this is a LOPA node. And the calculations are embedded in the LOPA node spreadsheet so that you just choose the option and most of the calculations are done for you. For type, let me select safety criteria and public criteria or something. Options are loaded, and we have the initiating event. The frequency is automatically displayed for me, and I can choose the event modifier type. Time asterisk, I can choose the modifier factor, 0.9. And There are a bunch of columns, the IPL values that I can select. Again, these IPLs are customizable. You can change the value. For example, let me select IPL 0. So it's given me the value of 1. But if I want this value to be changed, I have to follow the same process as I did to change the values from the lookup tables, where I click on IPL and then I look for the value I want, let's say 0.1. IPL1, let me change it to 1, for example. Close. And now I select IPL1 from the list and it's populated me with the value. So this way I can perform my LOPA here and I can choose the IPL type. So all these IPL calculations are embedded within the spreadsheet to give you the final value. There were two other things I wanted to talk about. One is ease of data entry, and the other one is file sharing. So data entry, there are suggestions that helps you fill up the columns without having to retype again and again. For example, I just type H here, it gives me the high temperature. And one thing to mention is this is not just limited to the current node you are using. You can also read values from all of the other nodes. And in terms of file sharing, you can import legacy files. You can import third-party CSV files into PSMPro, and it will just add as a node. If you do not have PSMPro license, you can actually use IO Viewer to generate the report for PSMPro files. And this is just a brief demonstration of PSMPro that can be given. There are a lot of other options that's included in the system.